guys, I'm sorry. It's been a week. I know. Actually, I do have some news for you guys. I have finally created a schedule. So, I'm going to at Monday at 5 from now on, at Monday at 5 p.m. or before, I'll create an episode, and on Friday at from Friday 4:30 to Saturday 1 p.m. I'm going to upload an episode between that time frame. So, yeah, basically, in case I can't do it on Friday, I'll have some time to do it on Saturday. Anyway, that's it for changes. We have an official schedule, and let's get started. Chapter 9 Ally. Without a diagnostic board or even a computer at his disposal, Derek had no choice but to activate the robot and rely on its own self-diagnostic capabilities. But before he could get even that far, he had a jigsaw puzzle to assemble. The headless robot was an EX series, but the differences did not affect the parts Derek needed to borrow to make the EG whole. The active systems, as opposed to the merely structural of any mass-produced robots, were modular and standardized. It would not have been possible to produce them economically any other way. So, the kidney-sized microvision power pack of the EX was a plug-compatible replacement for the damaged one inside the EG. But the power pack's mounting cradle, which contained the interface for the primary power bus, had also been damaged by the fight which had downed the robot. Regrettably, the cradle had not been designed for field replacement, and it seemed to be attached to every other component inside the EG's torso, and not by convenient micromagnetic fields. The manufacturer had settled for the less costly alternative of sonic welds. Lacking the proper tools, swapping the cradles was a challenge. He practiced on the damaged cradle inside the EG, and used his hard-won expertise to transfer the undamaged one into the vacancy. That alone took more than 2 hours, but when he was done, it took less than 2 minutes to swap power packs. Unfortunately, that did not end the matter. All the Farrier models, the basic data library used by the robot, was contained in removable memory cubes placed in a compartment just behind its collarbone. The robot's extensive post-ironic memory was reserved completely for the business of learning from experience. From the manager's standpoint, that arrangement meant that the post-ironic brains did not have to be specialized according to the robot's function. From the owner's viewpoint, it meant that their investment was protected against obsolescence or changing needs. But from Derek's perspective, it meant trouble. The headless robot had 5 cube slots, 4 of them occupied. For the EG, the numbers were 7 and 5, but the 2 empty slots and 3 of the occupied ones had been caught in the same blast that damaged the power cradle. There's no repairing them and no replacing them. But what was worse was that Derek was bound to use one of the 2 functional slots for the standard systems cube, without which the robot would know nothing about its own structure and operation. He had 5 cubes packed full of data and logic routines, and he could only use one of them at a time. Eventually he settled on the mathematics cube, concealing the personal defense cube for possible use at some future time. Derek's inventory of visible damage to the robot included severed cables that would render the right arm paralyzed, and a frozen gimbal on one of the dual gyroscopes. But with power and the working library restored, there's only one truly critical part left to see to: the post-ironic brain. In appearance, the brain was a 3-pound lump of platinum-radium. In function, it was the repository for the functional posteromotive potentials governing the robot's activity. For the temporary potentials which represented thought and decision, and for the pathways which represented learning. What Derek was hoping was that the fundamental pathways had not been randomized, as could happen if the brain had been exposed to hard radiation. There was no hope for the robot's experience base. The backup microcell used to refresh the pathways while the robot was being serviced had long since been exhausted and the pathways long ago decayed. The robot remembered nothing of its previous service, but if the brain was undamaged, it should function normally when reinitiated. Just like me. Given the equipment available, the only way to test the condition of the post-uronic brain was to activate the robot and test it. For obvious reasons, that was dangerous. At one point in the history of robotics, robots had been designed to shut down when they detected any internal error conditions. But several hundred years of progress in robotics design had produced a different philosophy built around fault tolerance and self-maintenance. He could not be sure what would happen. By the time he was ready to find out, Woolruff had either grown bored or was obliged to go tend to some other duty. That was a fortunate turn, since when the robot was activated, it would be facing a situation that no robot had ever faced before. It would have to decide whether Aranimus and Wolfruff were human enough that it was required to protect them and obey their orders. Since robots were, as a literal-minded to a fault, it should not have been a problem. Aranimus was clearly an alien, despite his superficially humanoid appearance. Wolfruff was even more so. Those who manufactured robots did not ordinarily limit the definition of a human being, but left it as broad as possible. A power plant worker in a mech suit did not look human, but a robot would obey its order. Robots could not be completely literal. They did not judge merely on appearance. A 3-year-old child was human, yet a robot would frequently decline its orders. It was possible that the programming which permitted those distinctions would find some fundamental identity between the aliens and Derek. If there was any way of preventing that, Derek was determined to do so. Because of the first law, the robot could not be used against him. But if the robot could be persuaded that the aliens were not entitled to protection under the first law, he might be able to use the robot against Aranimus. With some trepidation, Derek pressed the power reset. A moment later, all the robot's joints, except those in the damaged arm, stiffened. Its eyes lit up with a red glow that pulsed rhythmically. Alpha Alpha, Liaison Rho, Derek said, repeating the sequence of Greek letters which had appeared on the ID grating. Sigma Tau Sigma. There was a brief pause, and the robot's eyes began to glow steadily. My default language is Galactic Standard Aroan dialect, it said. No other language banks are currently available. Is that acceptable, sir? Derek broke into a smile. After his frustrations with the robots on the asteroid, it was a pleasure to be addressed civilly again. Aroran Galactic's fine. Yes, sir. Who is my owner, sir? I am, Derek said. You are never to acknowledge that to anyone. But if you ever receive conflicting orders from myself and another, my orders are always to take precedence. Yes, sir. But what name may I call you, sir? For some reason, Derek resented having to supply the robot with his meaningless, casually adopted name. Derek, he said, finally unable to think of an alternative. Yes, sir. To what name would you like me to respond? Derek suppressed a bitter laugh. Who am I to tell you your name when I can't even tell myself mine? So long as you're the only one on this ship, Alpha is name enough. Thank you, Derek. During my power-on self-test, I detected a number of error states. Would this be a convenient time to review them? In a moment, Derek said. Can you scan this compartment? Yes, sir. Are there any spy eyes here with us? I detect no active sensor of any sort, Derek. Good. Listen closely. Need to tell you something about what's happening. You and I are on board a spaceship populated by hostile life forms. These life forms are a potential threat to both of us. Until I tell you otherwise, you are to immediately enter a passive wait state anytime you have company or I leave the lab. I understand. Do not wish them to know that I am functional. That's right. Is it possible that these wait states will be of extended duration, sir? It is. Then may I ask if there are any problems to which I may devote myself during those periods? I'm sure we'll find some, Derek said. Right now the problem is getting you in shape. Let's have the first anomaly off your error list. The first That Derek knew of Wolfruff's return was when the robot stiffened suddenly and its eyes went black. A few seconds later, the Cannonoid entered the lab and crossed to where Derek was seated. She stood at Derek's elbow and peered briefly into the exposed inner mechanism of the robot, then turned to him. She seemed less animated than she had been earlier. "Our Animus would like a report on our progress. You can tell our Animus that I have reason to hope I'll have a robot for him in a few days. 'Ow many days?" "I don't know," Derek said, laying down the pencil he'd been using as a probe. "I also don't know how much it'll be able to do. I've replaced a few damaged components. Right now I'm trying to do something with the servos linkages for the right arm, which are really a mess. Was it you people who roughed up these robots, or did you find them this way?" "Can't say," Wolfruff said and headed for the door. "I tell Aranimus." "Hold on a moment," Derek said, standing. "You can also tell him that I don't work around the clock. I need time to rest and a place to do it." "Rest 'ard to get on Aranimus's ship," Wolfruff said, gesturing toward the floor. "Sleep 'ere." That was not an entirely unhappy prospect, since Derek had already determined that he had some privacy there. What about a pillow, some kind of cushion? The Cannonoid made a sort of whistling sound that Derek read as a sigh. "I'll get you something," she said, and started to go. "Am I going to be allowed to eat?" he called after her. The sigh was a wheeze this time. "I'll get you something." "Tell you what, Wolfruff," Derek said, drawing closer. "Why don't you show me where the food is kept so I can get it myself when I'm hungry? That'll save you some time running around on my account." Wolfruff wrinkled her cheeks in surprise, then frowned. "Our Animus wants you working, not running errands. That's my job." "We got enough things to do without all the extra work I'm creating," Derek said on a hunch. "If our Animus makes a fuss, tell him I insisted. If I'm going to do my best work, I'm going to need to get out of the lab from time to time just to clear my head." Cocking her head, Wolfruff considered it. "Okay, I show you." "Great. One more thing." The thought of an alien personal was an unpleasant one, but he was suddenly aware that there was some urgency. "I have some, extracurricular needs. Do you also, is there—" Wolfruff laughed to sound like purring. "Of course. Come here, I show you that too." There seemed to be fewer aliens afoot in the ship at that hour, which started Derek wondering about the sleep cycles observed by the various species aboard. The curiosity stayed in his mind while Wolfruff showed him the personal, identified to him the 3 foods in the pantry considered safe for him, and escorted him back to the lab. By the time that he was certain that she was fatigued, and when she left him, he was certain that it was for an appointment for bed. There was no lock on the lab door. There was no Norway guard to note his comings and goings. The opportunity was there if he wanted it. Wolfruff was not to disturb him. Perhaps Aranimus was now sleeping as well. Dave could scout the layout of the ship, snoop in some of the hundreds of storage bins he had seen. Or perhaps Aranimus was waiting for a report from Mulroth, and may soon be coming to check Derek's progress personally. Or perhaps he never slept. Perhaps his mind was structured in a way that he did not need the periodic dumpings dreams represented. His metabolism clocked at a steady pace rather than cycling through active and passive periods. The uncertainty stilled Derek's impulse to go exploring, at least for a time. Turning to the food he carried back with him, he gnawed at a few of the thick cracker-like biscuits, ate most of the fatty, malted blue paste, sipped at the honey juice. Though his taste buds regarded it all with suspicion, none of it alarmed his stomach. When he was done, his own fatigue was pressing in on him. He placed Alpha in a wait state, then unrolled the thin cushion in an open spot of floor and stretched out. The cushion did little to make the floor plates less hard. He supposed that Aranimus, slender as he was, would have found it entirely suitable. But Derek turned restlessly from back to side to stomach in a fruitless quest for a comfortable position. How long had it been since he had slept? 30 hours? 40? He had started the day a reluctant prisoner of the robots, and now he was an even more reluctant prisoner of the raiders. I really should go snooping, he thought. He could not let the opportunity pass. Perhaps the absence of a guard was an oversight that would be corrected tomorrow. I'll just lie here for an hour or so, he told himself. Make sure that Rhinomus isn't going to show up. Give Wolfruff a chance to settle in. Then it'll be safe. I can rest a little while. This poor excuse for a bed is too hard to sleep on anyway. He was wrong. One moment he was closing his eyes against the uncomfortable bright light which he had not been told how to douse. The next he was rubbing sleep out of those eyes, gingerly stretching sore muscles and bemoaning of his own foul breath. The room was in semi-darkness, but Wolfruff was crouching in the doorway, silhouetted against the velvet corridor. "Is it done yet?" Wolfruff asked brightly. "Eat space and die," Derek growled, and threw the nearest rock-sized bit of robot scrap in Wolfruff's direction. The Canonoid snatched it neatly out of the air and threw it back in one motion. "No thanks," she said in a curl-lipped grin. "I already 'ad breakfast." Though there was running water in the personal, there was no provision for a shower or bath. Derek settled for sponging himself off, though there were no blowers and the only towel available was harsh and scratchy. By the time he emerged, Wolfruff was nowhere in sight. Derek wondered if she had perhaps stopped by only to wake him, and would not be coming back. Thinking about that it wouldn't take him long to get tired of the fare, he carried another meal of biscuits, cheese, and honey back to the lab. Settling at the workbench, he resumed work on the robot's right arm. The electrical connections were sound, but the servo linkages were damaged beyond Derek's ability to repair. His efforts to do so only made things worse. Whatever skill he had was cybernetic, not electromechanical. "Alpha, I don't think I can fix your arm. I'm wondering if you can with your good arm. I could get a mirror so you could see inside." "I'm sorry, without a robotech cube in my library, my only abilities in this area are limited to diagnostics, sir." "I figured as much," Derek said, "but it never hurts to ask." "Sir, I detected the activated robot in the room. Perhaps it would be possible to salvage the appropriate parts from its mechanism to repair me." "That's what I've been trying to do," Derek said gruffly. "I can't do it, not without micro-manipulators. Besides, there's some structural damage in the solar mount which isn't replaceable." Sighing, Derek pushed himself back from the bench and crossed to where his paltry inventory of robot parts lay spread out on the floor. As it had many times before, his gaze fell on Monitor 5's arm. For the first time, he picked it up and examined it closely. "I guess you're going to have to make do with one wing," he said. "There's a lot of it going around." The robot made no reply. Derek turned the Monitor's arm over and tried to flex the elbow. It resisted, consistent with the fact that the hand had been locked in a literal death grip on the silver artifact. Consistent, Derek realized with a sudden shock, except that the arm contained no joints. Not the elbow, not the wrist, not the knuckle. While the elbow was bent at an obtuse angle, the wrist twisted slightly, the fingers curled. But in so far as he could tell, the arm was incapable of movement. There were any number of synth skin coverings which would flex and wrinkle realistically while masking joints. This was no covering. It was rigid to the touch and absolutely seamless, like a plastic casting. Puzzled, Derek carried it back to where the robot sat. "What magnification are your optical sensors capable of?" "Only a limited amount, sir. 100 power." "But resolution?" "That would vary with the distance of the object being observed, sir. The maximum resolution is approximately 10 micrometers." "That's better than I can do with that thing," Derek said, nodding toward the inspection scanner. "So you can tell me about the structure of this arm." "Sir, I am not knowledgeable in this area." "You can see and you can describe. I'll settle for that at the moment." "Yes, sir. May I hold the limb?" Derek surrendered the arm, and the robot held it at eye level in its rock-steady grip. At 10 power, the surface is undifferential, increasing magnification now. Gradularity becoming evident. There seems to be a regular pattern. Pattern resolving now into hexagonal planar surfaces. Maximum magnification. The robot paused for a fraction of a second. The surface appears to be consistent of 12-sided solids in close association. What? The surface appears? I heard you. Look at another spot. The robot turned his head slightly to the left. I observed the same pattern. The end. Look at the end where it broke off. The surface is much more irregular, but is made of the same dodecahedral units. All the way through? Yes, Derek. Derek stopped staring, dumbfounded. What the robot had described suggested a completely new approach to robotic design. Not an evolution, but a revolution. It sounded as though the supervisor robots had been built. No, it couldn't be. Killed your right shoulder control bus. Derek snapped. "The circuits are now inert," the robot said. Derek separated the three-conductor control wire from the damaged right arm and threaded it out through the opening he had been working. He touched the connector to the stump end of the supervisor arm, and it clung there as though it belonged. "Activate the control circuit. Send a command to bend the elbow." Almost instantly, the disembodied supervisor arm slowly began to flex. "Look at the joint," Derek commanded. "Tell me what's happening." "The changes are taking place more quickly than my scanner rate allows me to observe," the robot said. "However, I infer that the dodecahedrons are undergoing some kind of directed rearrangement. Flowing into a new shape! The material of the arm is transforming itself." "Those descriptors are imprecise but consistent with my observations. The technical term for such reorganization is morphalic alexis." Derek felt for his chair and sat down shakily. The supervisors had been built out of billions of tiny crystal-shaped modules, a cellular structure. Each had to contain kilometers of circuit connections, megabytes of programming. It was the cells that were the robots. The robots were more like organisms. What a feat of engineering they represented! The essence of a robot in a package a few microns in diameter. Properly programmed, they could take on any shape. A supervisor was an infinity of specialized forms, held within one generalized package. As he marveled, Derek was reminded of something he had not thought about for several days. The cellular design bore the same distinctive stamp that the asteroid colonies, lifts, and environmental system had. Superficial simplicity achieved on the strength of hidden complexity. Elegance of design, novelty of approach. It was another brush of the minimalist designer, and it gave Derek one more reason to escape from the raiders. Because somehow, somewhere, he had to meet the designer. Chapter 10: More Than Schematics. After a short break for a late lunch of the same monotonous foods, Derek set about installing the cellular arm in place of the robot's original limb. It was not an easy task, requiring both structural and functional marriages between two widely divergent technologies. Derek was worried about the functional link first, not only because he expected it to be a tougher challenge. If the robot could not control the new arm, there was no point in going to the trouble of attaching it. But the cellular arm apparently used the same standard command set and carrier voltages. Though there was no evidence of any contacts or wiring in the stump end, the arm responded no matter where Derek attached the control bus. Experimenting, he found that the arm responded even if he attached the control bus to the skin of the forearm, a palm of the hand, even the tips of two fingers. It seemed as though the cellular microbots were smart enough to accept the command input from any location and channel it to the appropriate sites. Once attached, the arm responded not only to all the robot's basic motor commands, but even some novel commands. With coaching from Derek, the robot was able to think an additional joint into his arm between the elbow and wrist. In another test, Derek asked the robot to try to modify the cellular thumb and forefinger into long, slender microclamps. To his delight and amazement, it could. With the right command codes, the material of the arm seemed to be infinitely malleable. But no matter how Derek prepared the mounting ring the arm was connecting to, The right shoulder joint remained weaker than the left was, or the original had been. At one point, the cellular arm broke loose completely when the robot tried to lift an object weighing less than 20 kilos. Even after he reattached it, Derek had doubts if it would withstand the stretches of, for instance, a brawl. "Looks like you're going to have one strong arm and one smart one," he told the robot. "Try not to forget which is which." "It is not possible for me to forget, sir." "This isn't an off-the-shelf replacement," Derek said sternly. "Unless you've burned what it can do and can't do into your pathways, you be careful with it, and never let anyone but me see you doing tricks with it, understand?" When Derek was talking, the robot went rigid and its eyes dim. Derek knew what that meant, and fell silent. A moment later he heard the soft padding of Woolruff's footsteps in the corridor. It was becoming a familiar sound, for it was Woolruff's third visit to the lad that day. Aranimus, apparently occupied with the duties of ship's boss, had managed only two. Unlike the previous visits, this one was casual. Woolruff had no messages for him and no burning curiosity about what he was doing with the robot. It was almost as though she was using checking on him as an excuse to avoid other work, or trying to cultivate his friendship. But Derek kept up his guard. Woolruff was Aranimus's lieutenant, no matter how sympathetic she may seem. Even her concern for him was being tortured, he had decided. Even her concern for him while he was being tortured, he had decided, was nothing more than a good cop, bad cop stage show meant to speed his surrender. As before, Woolruff stayed but a few minutes, then continued on to some other task. As soon as she was out of earshot, the robot reanimated. "I understand, sir," it said as though there had been no interruption. "The next time you have to go down like that, you might spend your time trying to analyze the arm's command set. Can you do that?" "I can try, sir. Should be possible to separate those command codes which are invalid from those which are nulls. However, I will have to be fully functional to test the valid codes and determine their function. Let's wait on that until we know we're going to have some privacy." He paused a moment to decide what he needed doing next. There was still the matter of reprogramming the robot, but that was also a job which required some assurance of privacy. The best opportunity seemed to be during shipboard night, which was also the best time to explore the ship. Too much to do, too little time, Derek thought, but if he was going to make the better use of the night hours than he had last night, he needed to be better rested. "Alpha?" "Yes, Derek? What time is it?" "I don't know what time it is, since my temporal register has not been reset since I was deactivated. However, it has been 14 decades since reinitialization." Decades were units of Auroran decimal time, Derek recalled. "I'm going to take a nap. Wake me in a standard hour." "Yes, sir." But it was Aranimus, not the robot, who woke him. "Are you finished? Is my server ready?" he demanded, looming over Derek like some long-limbed waterbird. "Not yet," Derek said sleepily, sitting up. He noted with satisfaction that the robot was standing inert by the workbench. It, at least, had not been taken by surprise. "Then why do you rest? To keep me waiting?" "I rest so I don't get so tired that I make a mistake that'll damage the robot," Derek said. "Maybe your kind doesn't have that need, but humans do." Aranimus did not take offense at Derek's tone. "I've observed that humans are even less efficient than are we. You would make very poor workers, wasting 1/3 of your time in rest." He turned his back on Derek and went to where the robot stood. "But then perhaps that is why you had invented such a machine, which labor in your service tirelessly. How is it done?" "What do you mean?" Derek asked, coming to his feet. "What is the source of energy?" Aranimus asked, tracing a line down the robot's torso with his long fingers. Derek knew that being evasive, pretending ignorance would only anger the alien. "A microfusion power pack," he said. "There's one on the bench there, just left of the scanner." Aranimus picked up the damaged power pack and studied it. "So small. How many days of service does it contain?" "Depends on how hard the robot is working. The fuel capsule is good for several hundred days of light work, like domestic service. A laborer would obviously need fueling more often." "Remarkable," Aranimus said, returning the power pack to the bench. One of his eyes seemed to focus briefly on the transplanted arm, then swung back toward Derek. "We're making progress?" "I am." "How long until you're ready to activate it?" "I'll be ready to start testing its system tomorrow or the next day. How soon it'll be will depend on how much is wrong." Aranimus seemed to accept that. "The first job of this robot will be helping you make more robots." Frowning, Derek stepped forward. "How many more?" "We'll begin with 50." Derek wondered if that figure represented the number of Nari on board. He briefly enjoyed the thought of Aranimus replacing his brow-beaten crew with an army of obedient robots, only to discover that, at a word from Derek, he couldn't command them at all. But he could not kid himself or allow Aranimus to entertain unreasonable expectations. "I don't think you understand the complexity of these machines," Derek said. "They're not something you put together as a hobby, no matter how good a materials lab you have. And frankly, this isn't a very good one. I'll probably be able to get this robot put together and keep it repaired. But if you want 50 robots, you're going to have to look somewhere else for them. I'm not just enough to pull post-Ironic brains or microfusion cells out of a hat." "If you had not destroyed your robot colony," Aranimus said, his voice rising. "I told you before that robots did that on their own," Derek insisted. "But that doesn't mean you're stuck. You take this ship to any spacer world, and you'll find millions of robots. You won't have to steal them either. Robots are a major trade item between the worlds. Any one of them would be happy for a new customer." That's not entirely true, of course. It was highly doubtful the spacers would willingly turn over examples of their most advanced technology to an alien race. And even if they were willing, there's the problem of what Aranimus could offer as payment. But if Derek could make Aranimus believe it was the truth, coax him to take a ship to the human world, he would at least have succeeded in alerting them to the alien's existence, and possibly have laid the groundwork for his own release. "If commerce is so welcome, then why did your robots destroy themselves?" "Because you came in firing your weapons and declared yourself an enemy," Derek said. "If you'd come in as a friend, it would have been different. Take me to your navigator. I'll help him set a course for the nearest spacer world." "And find out where we are in the process," he said silently. "I will evaluate the options," Aranimus said, moving toward the corridor. "In the meantime, you'll continue your work. I'll return tomorrow to see my robot activated." The reprogramming could not be postponed any longer, Derek decided. He did not think Aranimus would return soon. He would have to hope that Woolruff would not either. Unfortunately, Derek did not have the equipment to alter the robot's program directly, which would have been risky anyway. Since it was intimately bound up in the laws of robotics, the robot's definition of what a human was comprised some of the most crucial and deeply engraved patterns within its brain. What needed doing would have to be done more directly. "Alpha," he said, "did you scan the organism that was just here?" "Yes, Derek. And earlier today, did you scan another type of organism visiting the lab?" "What did you Yes, Derek. What did you think of them?" "I have no previous knowledge of humans of this type." That was the response Derek had been fearing. "Stop, they're not humans." "Sir, I'm aware that my data library is not complete. However, I'm unable to categorize them in any other fashion unless you can provide me with evidence for your assertion. Compare their appearance with mine." "Sir, I acknowledge that there are numerous anomalous differences. However, these differences fall in areas where the definition of human has a wide latitude, such as skin color and covering, dimensions, and vocal timbre. The similarities are in more fundamental areas, such as bilateral similarity, bipedal locomotion, oxygen respiration. They are humanoid as you are, but they are not human. I note your assertion, sir, but am unable to confirm it." Derek understood that he was not being called a liar. When it had no independent knowledge, a robot would ordinarily accept the word of a human as gospel. But a robot was under no obligation to accept a human's claim that it was raining when its own sensors told it otherwise. This was not a clear-cut It was not that clear-cut an issue, but the robot was biased toward a generous definition of what a human was. Otherwise, there's the danger of a robot being used as an assassin by the simple step of persuading it that its target was not a human. Derek understood, but even so it was annoyed. "I suppose that if they had 12 arms and belched fire when they talked, you might believe me." Sir, in the matter at hand, the morphological considerations are not primary in my analysis. Explain, what are the discriminators? Sir, I based my conclusion on the observations that the organisms called Animus and Woolruff are intelligent beings capable of independent reasoned thought. How do you know? Sir, you carried on a dialogue with each of them. Although humans on occasionally talk on animate objects, and may give the appearance of carrying on a dialogue with certain animals, I perceived your discussions as having a qualitatively different nature. Are you saying that because I treat them as human, you have to think of them that way? While there is uncertainty, as there may be when a human wears a costume or disguise, I am obliged to use such cues as available. Your behavior created a strong presumption that Animus and Woolruff are human. I talk to you the same way I talk to them. Does that make you a human? No, Derek, I'm a robot, a technological artifact. To the degree that I may seem human, only because I have been designed to do so in order to more easily interact with humans. Derek was growing frustrated. Tell me this, then. How do you tell the difference between a robot and a human at a distance? Sir, just as I have an operational definition of the class of organisms called human, I also have one of that class of objects called robots. It is ordinarily possible to distinguish between the two based on the characteristics they do not have in common. It is not a perfect system, however, and may be fooled as by a human form robot of the type developed by Dr. Han Fastol. Derek had to concede the point of the robot. If only it could show its skin scrapings from the three of us. But if Randomus or Wolfruff happened to have a cellular structure, I'd be no better off. Might even decide its right arm is human. Robots are spacers, settlers, and Earth people all human? Yes, Endley. Yes. Have you personally observed every member of these three groups? No, Derek. There are approximately 8 billion Earth people, 5 billion spacers, and if you had not observed them individually, how is it that you are able to classify them all as human? Spacers and settlers are descendants of the original human community on Earth, the robot replied. Therefore, any individual correctly identified as a settler or spacer cannot be other than human. Why is that? Derek asked, though he knew the answer. They share a phylogenic relationship. The offspring of a human must be human. In other words, what really counts is biology. The genes and human DNA humans carry in their cells. Yes. And the guidelines that are built into your definition of human are simply shortcuts to make it unnecessary for you to subject everyone you encounter to a biological assay. The final criterion is DNA. That is correct, Derek. But you have no way of examining a person's DNA directly. No, sir. Fine. So that each of the anomalies in Aranimus's appearance fell within the acceptable parameters for natural variation and mutation. Yes, sir. I asked you to calculate the probability that all of Aranimus's anomalies would have appeared in a single organism. The robot scarcely hesitated. The probability is extremely small. And for Wolfruff, the probability is somewhat higher, but still on the order of 1 chance in 10 to the 15th power. In other words, there is a less than a 1 in 10,000 chance that a mutation this extreme would have arisen once in all of human history. And here there are two of them, not only alive in the same time but in the same place, and both as different from each other as they are from me. It is quite remarkable. No doubt further study of these individuals will be of great benefit. Derek sighed exasperately. Listen, my thick-headed robot friend, stop thinking one step at a time. Isn't the probability that an independently evolved life form might be bipedal, bilateral, and oxygen breather greater than the probability that these creatures are mutant humans? Can Geranimus and Wolfruff be intelligent without being human? Yes, that is possible. The robot paused, a sign of great activity in its post-Uranic pathways. However, since no independently evolved intelligent life forms are known, it is difficult to assign a probability to a specific form. I challenge your premise, Derek pounced. Why are most robots humanoid? Higher robots are humanoid because it is successful generalization design and because the other reasons don't matter. Derek said. Apply that standard to the question of Aranimus and Woolruff. Again the robot paused before answering. My post-emotive potentials are extremely high on both sides of this question, it said at last. I believe this state may be similar to that which human describes as confusion. Get to the point. What's the verdict? It is my tentative conclusion that Aranimus and Woolruff are not human. We are not obliged by the first law to protect them, or the second law to obey them? No, Derek. Good, he said with relief. You can live. Now listen closely. I have some important instructions for you in concerning our alien hosts. Okay, that's the end. Okay. Anyway, yeah. I gave him my new official schedule at the time that I'm going to post it, which is going to be, well, 4:30 out of 5 p.m., but basically 5 p.m. before on Mondays, and Friday 4:30 p.m. to Saturday 1 p.m. for the other episode of the week. Anyway, that is all. Thank you for watching. God, that took forever. And hope you listen to Fridays. Bye.